Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 130 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans, and what's left of Husker Nation.
Yes, we welcome all of Husker Nation and the rest of college football to today's podcast. So for those of you who may be listening to the podcast for the first time, we are a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. And we'll be focusing on our team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, as well as the wider world of college football. And today we'll be discussing Nebraska's game against Oklahoma, as well as the firing of our defensive coordinator, Erik Chinander, and the big games of week 3 of college football, as well as a belated discussion of the expansion of the college football playoff to 12 teams. So a lot to get to today.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk about a couple of these subjects many times again.
Oh, yes. There's always plenty to mine in the world of college football.
Absolutely.
But before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition and crack open a beverage.
Yes.
Today I have another beer from Kona Brewing Company. It's the Big Wave Golden Ale.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's cool. And I am drinking a Bell's Oberon. Bell's is a Michigan-based brewery out of Comstock, Michigan. And the Oberon beverage is a very, very popular summer American wheat ale, they call it. But they only produce it in the summertime, and then once the season is over, then they stop producing it. So I'm enjoying one of the last beers of the Oberon variety for the season.
There we go. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
Okay.
Attentive listeners will probably be able to tell that we're back to remote podcasting this week after being together for the last podcast.
Yes.
We were both in Traverse City, Michigan for the Saturday where the Oklahoma-Nebraska game was played. However, both of us were busy that Saturday, so we weren't able to watch the game live. And both of us were anticipating, that we could very well get blown out. So it wasn't exactly one that we were eager to watch, to begin with, per se.
That is correct. I kind of made it clear that I didn't anticipate this was going to go well for Nebraska, and that really the next 4 games are the ones that I'm going to judge, are we making progress or not as a team with different leadership.
That's right. And we did give our predictions on the last podcast. I was very much on the optimistic side and gave a prediction that Oklahoma would win 49-42, whereas you predicted a more lopsided 56-14.
Right.
And I predicted that they would score 49, which turned out to be correct. But you were more close in terms of the spread of points.
Yes. Boy, that's reaching to give yourself credit for that.
Hey, it's something. I'll take what I can get. Because the final score ended up being 49 Oklahoma, 14 Nebraska. I was driving out to a friend's house on Saturday, and I caught the first 3 drives over the radio, listening to the Nebraska broadcast of it, which was pretty quick stop by our defense of Oklahoma's offense, then a nice drive by Casey Thompson and the team down the field to quickly score a touchdown. And then we had him on like 3rd and 7 or something on defense, and the Oklahoma quarterback breaks out of this pass and runs along the sideline for a touchdown. And that was right around the time I arrived at my friend's house.
And that was like 60 yards too, right? Like it was,
yeah.
It was a long one.
It was a long one.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we never did a damn thing after that.
Right. With the exception of one touchdown in the 4th quarter when we were out of the game.
We were playing their scrubs, basically. We were playing their 2nd and 3rd teamers.
Right. Yeah, I ended up watching some of the game on YouTube just to get a general sense of what was going on, though I didn't watch the whole game. And one thing that was clear was Brett Venables, who's Oklahoma's new coach and was the defensive coach at Clemson. He was coming in with a heavy blitzing strategy that was really getting to Casey Thompson. Was pretty sad sometimes how easy it was for them to get in the backfield. And eventually we swapped him out for our second team quarterback, Chuba Purdy, I think mostly to try to avoid him getting too beat up.
Well, and just we needed a change. We needed to try somebody else, right? To figure out what the heck can we do, but the reality is that our offensive line was simply not up to the task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we knew was going to be the case because the offensive line has been a point of concern in the games against far lesser talent than Oklahoma has.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we did have, like we said, we had that nice offensive series to open the game where the offensive line was giving us some protection, creating some holes for Anthony Grant to run through. And one other note of positivity I did notice on our defensive side of the ball was that I did see some better tackling in the sense that even if we didn't like fully wrap a guy up and bring him down immediately, our guys were going for the legs more, at least holding the guy in place, so then the rest of the team could get there to take him down. I definitely noticed an increase of that compared to last week.
The previous games, yeah. Well, I think we are working on it, but again, you can't fix an offensive line in 1 week, and you sure as heck can't fix, tackling necessarily just by emphasizing it for a day or two in practice. The fact that we weren't aware and weren't focused on that as a major issue for the team back in spring practice and maybe the early parts of fall practice is a huge deal, right? And it might take us till mid-season with another 2 or 3 weeks. We have a week off this week, a bye week, which hopefully will be used to do exactly that, to be physical and to really work on tackling.
Right. Yes, the bye week is definitely sorely needed for Mickey Joseph to try to get some more stability into the team, I would say. Some interesting stats from the game. They ended up having 580 total yards against us, while we had 327. Though the passing completion was actually pretty solid. It was 21 of 31 with 1 interception. And in terms of penalties, they had 6 for 65, while we had 5 for 40. And we had 2 sacks against them, while they had 4 on us.
It seems like there were more.
Right.
So that means
he was getting the ball away at least.
Yeah, he was getting the ball away, and he was running for his life and getting away with it.
Right. Yeah, that definitely happened plenty. Props to the punter. There were 7 punts for a total of 296 yards. So we were putting him to work this game.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. But that's a game that you watch it with the team, and then you move on, right? You don't dwell on it very much, other than to say, these are the main takeaways. We need to tighten up our offensive line play, and we need to tackle better, and we need to understand our assignments and play at 100% speed.
Right. Definitely. And one unfortunate thing that did come of the game was that A.J. Allen, one of our running backs, got hurt in the game. Turns out he's going to be going through surgery and will be taking a red shirt, will be out for the rest of the season. He was the clear kind of second best running back to Anthony Grant. But I remember when we were watching the Georgia Southern game together, you had mentioned how his smallness was going to be a problem, and his being prone to injury and all that.
Okay, so my issue with that is that when a small guy like that, it would have been much better if we had been able to either utilize him very little or even redshirt him this year, so that he had a chance to get a little stronger physically before we put him into the demand of the program. that just happens over and over again. It's also why our offensive linemen are getting hurt. We've got to be able to, Scott, our former coach, used to talk about the fact that you gotta get old and stay old, and we're not doing a very good job of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, you can see why they wanted to put him in, right? Because he clearly has good eyes, good speed. Yeah. He
Yes.
can be an asset to the team.
Absolutely, I agree.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that definitely is a bummer. Means there's gonna be more pressure on Anthony Grant. Although there was another running back that we were
Irvin Jr.
Right. He was who we were playing later in the game, right?
Correct. And we also let Yant have a few carries, right? So we've got some depth at that position that should allow us to continue to be effective if we could actually make a hole for a running back to run through.
Right. Yeah. And the other kind of part of the game that's worth really talking about from the Nebraska perspective is, in the fourth quarter, like we mentioned, Chubba Purdy, the second team quarterback, had a nice series where he, drove us down the field for a score, sometimes tugging the ball and running it himself. And I did like that it was obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it was against Oklahoma's, second teamers or whatever. But it was more of the progressive, just getting first down style, right? Like there were a lot of third downs in that drive, and I think there were over like 13 or 14 plays.
Exactly. It was actually a beautiful drive.
Yeah.
If I didn't know that it was being done against, the younger players from Oklahoma, but I agree with you that the decision making and the play calling lended itself to getting first downs and moving the chains.
Right.
And that's been a pet peeve of mine forever, right? I think, again, lack of patience among our offensive coordinators over the years to recognize the value of just remaining, worry about the first down. Get the damn first down, and the touchdowns will come.
Right. Very true. Yeah, we've talked about that plenty on the podcast before. So then one surprise we were given after the game was that it was announced that Erik Chinander, our defensive coordinator, who's been with us under the Scott Frost era, has been fired. And he's being replaced by Bill Bush, who was the special teams coordinator that was just promoted that position this year. So now he's the defensive coordinator. And Joey Connors, who was the quality control special teams assistant, is now the main special teams coach. So another interesting shakeup amongst the coaching staff. Obviously, people generally have put Chinander, not saying that he's putting him on a pedestal or saying that he was great, but at least saying that he was pretty good amongst our coaching lineup in the past, right? Because we had pretty good defenses. Overall, it was more the offense that was often what was losing us games. But then this year, we've seen a huge step back, part of that being due to players leaving the program. But then, you also have to wonder if Chinander didn't put his all into the coaching this past year, maybe because of the whole Scott Frost situation, right? And knowing that it was likely he'd be looking for another job in a year or whatever. So we'll have to see if this change helps us at all or not.
Right. And it will only help us if schematically and in terms of our preparation, did let's see here, did we do that? Did actual changes happen that led the players to be able to play better? Are we going to simplify the defense, all that sort of stuff? And that's where I would argue Chinander's weakness is his ability to adjust. You can recall again over the last few years of our discussions how many times I complained about our inability to adjust.
Right. And for example, one specific thing I can think of is in the Georgia Southern game, we switched to more of a zone defense in the second half, which did help us slow them down compared to where we were in the first half. but it's a little odd that it took us a whole half to make that adjustment, right? When,
Right.
you could have done that after a one quarter or whatever, you
Well,
know?
except that they had a game plan, right? And so they had probably devoted to a majority of their practice time to, trying to man up on these guys. And then when they started going to more of the zone, the players were not as repped in preparation for that, and weren't performing very well, or they maybe just flat out didn't even try because they didn't have confidence in it as a coaching staff. Well, you can't be caught without enough defense. You know what I mean? You have to have prepped and repped various circumstances throughout the spring practice and fall in preparation for the season to know how to do that sort of stuff, right? I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
got to be able to do both. You can't just sit in a man and say that you can have that as your primary, but you damn well better be able to go to zone, right?
Right.
And yeah, those are things that, again, it's about quality repetitions, and I question whether we were getting that on either offense or defense with Scott Frost's staff.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true. So as you mentioned, we have a bye this upcoming week, which will be helpful for us because we've already played 4 games this year. And our next opponent is against Indiana, who's currently 3-0. Some of those wins were pretty close, like against Illinois and things like that. And they're playing Cincinnati this weekend. But that's, like you say, this next stretch of like Indiana, Rutgers, that's going to be the real test for Mickey Joseph, to see if we can, hopefully solidly beat these teams, instead of coming down to these 3-point losses like we've been having.
Well, I would say it differently. I would say I believe that our roster should be at least comparable to Indiana's roster, right? And so we should be able to compete with that program, with that group of athletes. Now, I will concede that I have great respect for Indiana's coach, and I would anticipate his coaching and staff are going to be ready. Right, they're going to have a good game plan, and they're going to be ready to do that. Now, can Mickey do that with 2 weeks? Can he gather the troops, so to speak, and I mean specifically his staff first and foremost, and put together a game plan that makes sense, right? And can he utilize these 2 weeks to get the defense and the offense with a different approach and mentality, so that they come out in the game against Indiana with a very different mindset and dedication to winning? Because athletically, we should compare with Indiana. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I'll put extra emphasis on this Indiana game because it is at home, whereas then the following week we're at Rutgers, and the week after that we're at Purdue, and we come back home after another bye week for Illinois.
Right.
So if we can't beat Indiana at home, it's going to put us, feeling less confident going to away games with Rutgers and Purdue.
Absolutely. Well, and that's my point. Is one way or t'other after these next 4 games, we'll know very clearly whether Mickey Joseph has any chance at all of making the kind of change that would lead him to be a candidate or one of the candidates. If we don't do well in this 4-week stretch, then I believe that Trev would then have the open door, so to speak, to go ahead and select a new coach and announce that new coach, earlier, right? I mean, he could accelerate his interview process and all that,
Right.
because everybody would understand that Mickey's not a candidate.
Right. Because you had mentioned that it could be a almost, too much of a good thing in a way if Mickey does really turn things around, and we're looking much better going into our last third of our season. But that's around the time that Trev would like to announce the new coach, but he feels like he can't because now there's momentum behind Mickey and what he's doing with the team.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. And there's a chance we're going bowling, right? If we
Right.
win these 4 games, we're now at five wins, and with whatever four games to go, and so maybe we squeak out a win against Minnesota or Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Yep, certainly possible. Certainly possible. So one thing that we've talked about in the past, we mentioned it briefly, I think on the 2 weeks ago podcast, was this report that the intercommittee for the college football playoff had decided to expand the roster of teams to a 12-team playoff instead of the current 4-team playoff. Now, none of that was uh, published officially, but everybody, all the major news sites were running with it. So we can take it with pretty strong certainty that this is a thing that is going to happen. It's just a question of how exactly will they structure it, when are they going to announce it, et cetera, et cetera. We weren't able to talk about it too deeply at the time, but now we're going to dedicate some real time to it. Obviously, this came up last year with the whole 12-team playoff thing being considered. At the time, it was kind of rejected, was the story. But it seems like with USC, UCLA moving to the Big Ten and that whole alliance between the Pac-10, Pac-12, and the Big 12, it was the ACC, that all kind of fell apart a little bit. The verbal let's play nice kind of thing they had going. So it seems that may have accelerated this move to 12 teams. Is that what you would say?
I would say absolutely that those changes certainly led people to say, okay, we need to move in this direction, because number one, they want the money, and everybody knew that was true. But equally important was, I think, that the Big Ten commissioner and maybe some of the other commissioners, had particular issues that were needed to be resolved. They needed to be clarified before they would put their weight behind a 12-team playoff. And things like having the conference champions be guaranteed to, be in the championship playoff. So those are the kind of details that have been worked out behind the scenes that allowed this to then kind of get approved by this particular committee, and will likely lead to a kind of rubber stamp approval now from the other groups that need to, view it.
Right. And the exact number of those conference champions and how that'll all work out could very well change in the next year or two, because of all the shakeups with conference realignment, right? Like we've discussed, if even more teams from the Pac-12 left to join the Big Ten, or from the Big 12, or, wherever, we could be in a situation where we have 4 power conferences instead of 5. But for now, we're going to presume that we have the 5 that we currently have. So the most obvious thing would be to say that the 5 conference champions from the Power 5 all get guaranteed placements in that 12-team system. And then you have one guaranteed champion from the group of 5, whoever's like the highest rank for that year, is also guaranteed in, to give them motivation and, get that political pressure off the Power Five's back, with the other 6 positions being at-large bids.
Right, and I think that is a very accurate description. It'll tweak a little bit, but generally speaking, I think that's the way that's going to play out, with obviously the top 4 teams being given a bye week, right? Like there'll be the 4 teams that don't have to play in the first week.
Right, which, I think does a good job of still giving you a pretty big reward, for having yourself be ranked in the top 4, right? Because obviously not having to play that week, and avoiding injuries and having extra time to practice and everything would definitely be a benefit. I know some fans are clamoring for having these playoff games be played at college stadiums, right? Now that it's expanded to this wider pool of games, maybe have the first round be, at the higher ranked teams campus, and then go to the bowls for the later rounds. What would you think of that?
Right. And I think that would be cool. I like that idea, because you don't want all your teams having to travel to bowl like type environments, for 3 or 4 weeks, right? You just don't want that. That's not gonna work. It's the logistics of it, the cost of it, and the focus aspect of it. Are you really going to get the best quality uh, opposition, if that's what you're putting the teams through?
Right.
And oh, by the way, these guys are at the end of their semester, you know, and they are supposed to still be going to school.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, and I know that's one thing that was raised in opposition to the idea of the 12-team playoff is that this is adding several more games that will extend the season into January, right? So we're already kind of bumping into the holiday season, and now you're also getting into like the start of the next semester of school and all that sort of stuff. So I am curious to see how the colleges kind of navigate that.
right, I agree. Well, I mean, again, the number of them that are really going through that whole gauntlet is going to be two teams, right? Every other team, it's one less, and a lot of teams it might be two less, or even just one and done. So, but if you have a conference championship game, so you're playing a 13th game in the conference championship game, and then you're playing a first round playoff game because you weren't one of the top four. That's a 14th game, right? And then you got two more games, so that's 16 games that particular team is going to be playing, right?
Right. Yeah. Now, I know in our conversations about the 12-team playoff from last year, I was actually a bit more on the advocating for the side of the 8-team playoff, just
Yeah,
because A, that way we're not expanding, so much so fast, and B, it helps to preserve the importance of the regular season, right? Because the bigger you expand it, the more that, you could make arguments for 2 and 3 lost teams, to make it in there. So if you make it 12, right, those at-large teams that are on the cusp, right? Who's number 11 and number 12? There'll be quite a few teams that can probably make a reasonable argument as to why they should make it in. And those debates over the playoff committee's decisions will just get even more heated, I think.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, and you are completely accurate that we there's all kinds of whininess and debate about who deserves to be number 4 now. You know how many more teams are going to have, like you say, a resume argument to be number 12?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be huge. And but again, the other thing, that won't really be a hard argument until one of those high seeds, the 11th or 12th team in, actually wins it.
Right, because I guess the tricky thing now is because there's only 4 teams, so it's really kind of do or die, and you're talking about the best teams in the country versus by the time you're getting to 12, okay, you had a good season, but you're not like, you didn't win your conference, you may not have even been the second best in your conference.
Right. You may have 3 losses.
Right. You may be
Right.
Bo Pelini, Nebraska.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And you just happen to lose to the 3 teams that were pretty darn good, right? And so that was enough because of your other victories to get you in.
Right. So, we've discussed in the past about our frustrations with the current 4-team system, and its preference for the SEC, right, and not valuing the winning your conference, as such a high bar. So, going to a
Right.
system where you guarantee that the conference champions all make it in, which means all the conferences across the nation will all have an investment in the playoff, is definitely a step in the right direction. I think everybody will enjoy that. Um, I guess it's just a question of, like, kind of like I said, my main worry would be kind of diluting the overall, importance of the regular season because of you're expanding it so much, and maybe will we be able to keep that same momentum through now? Now it's not just 2 rounds of a playoff, but it's gonna be 4 rounds, so it's gonna go on for
Correct.
like an entire
And
month.
and the injury toll, okay? And or if it's late in the season, right? And I could see a team that is solidly in the top group, maybe even making some personnel decisions, who plays and who doesn't, for a late season game. Okay, I'm already guaranteed that I'm going to be in my playoff, my conference championship. I mean, right? I'm 11-0, and I'm guaranteed, right?
Right.
And I'm Nebraska. Let's just say, because I want to project a future perfect scenario. But Iowa is our final opponent, right? They're our 12th game. Do I not play some of my starters because I'm already in? I'm already going to be competing against either Ohio State or Michigan for the conference championship, right? So I want to make sure I'm healthy or my quarterback is healthy for that game because he's dinged up from the 11 previous games. Well, I start my second teamer and I say he's unavailable for that week, right? Even though realistically he could play.
Right. Yeah.
I
No.
mean, you can see all those kinds of scenarios playing out, much like an NFL team does.
Right. No, there's definitely truth to that, and like I get it might come down to questions, right, of well, if we sacrifice the game here, are we risking not being one of the top 4 teams, right? Because being one of the top 4 and having that bye week, is a valuable thing. But if you don't think you're in that discussion, right, but you're more focused on the conference championship, right, then you say, okay, well, screw it. We can afford to lose this game if we have to. We'll still play the conference championship game. We'll have all of our top guys there. And when we win that, then we'll have everybody a little more healthy for the playoff.
Right. And we'll still be one of the top 4, let's say, and be able to get the bye week. Or maybe we weren't going to be in the top 4 regardless. So we weren't even fighting for that. We already knew that we were kind of, you know what I mean? Like it was far fetched to believe that we were going to end up in the top 4.
Right.
Right. So our seeding was going to likely be 7 or 8. Well, then who cares? Where I'm going to make these conscious decisions that risk me losing a game because that game no longer matters as much as the bigger picture of winning the conference championship and winning, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's just, I could see those kinds of decisions happening.
Yeah, definitely. Though I am now, just as you're talking about, I am foreseeing, because the whole bias towards the SEC, right, that can still come into play in terms of the rankings. Mm-hmm. So, okay, yeah, the 6 conference champions are all in there, but, we think that Alabama, who lost the conference championship game but had a great season, still deserves to be number 4, above Michigan, who won the Big Ten. So that means they get the bye week, even though they're not the champion, right?
Right, exactly right. No, well, and that's the point. And again, this doesn't solve the problem of the Big Ten choosing on their own. So they self-inflicted this because of what they thought the rules were going to be, and how things were going to be evaluated. We chose to play 9 games, play 9 conference games. And, the SEC and the other conferences didn't, or some of them didn't. And so that's not a level playing field. And that is going to continue to be an issue that will lead to the SEC having more teams in the playoff, even in years where the Big Ten had greater depth. I mean, like last year's, bowl season kind of pointed out the fact that, yes, the SEC was the best at the top, right? Clearly. But the depth of the SEC was not as good as the depth of the Big Ten.
Right. No, that's true. And that's something that I think has been rumored, at least. Maybe they might reconsider that when they bring in USC and UCLA, right? And if the conference does expand to like 20 teams or something, right, that could be a time to revisit that scheduling idea.
Right.
So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Yep. But clearly a time of significant change in the sport of college football. And we haven't even spoken the word NIL, in this, or transfer portal, so which are two other, monumental changes in the sport that are still having massive ramifications. So, I mean, we are on such wobbly ground as a sport. It's not even funny.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Lots of things are changing. So now we're going to move on to talking about the big games from this past weekend of college football and look ahead to the games that are coming up this weekend, give a little prediction to close out the podcast here. And the game that we decided to do predictions for last time was the Penn State-Auburn game, which was being held at Auburn. And you decided that Auburn was going to win that one 31-24. Well, I predicted that Penn State would win 27-24. In the end, Penn State did end up winning, but it was by a much higher margin than I predicted of 41-12.
Yeah, I think we both kind of misevaluated both of those teams. I mean, quite frankly, Penn State might very well be better than we thought, and Auburn is clearly not as good as I thought.
Right. Now, having said that, I did watch a highlight of that game, and Auburn had some nice drives on offense, but then they were forced to settle for field goals. So in the first half, the game was close, and then I think Auburn had a turnover near the end of the second quarter that gave Penn State an easy touchdown, go up by 10 or something like that. And then in the second half, they just kind of started dominating. They had a running back that got two huge 50-yard touchdown runs or something like that. So yeah, I know Penn State. Yeah, they've had some games that would make you kind of question their talent for this year earlier in the season, but this was a good defining win for them.
Yes, it was, and well, it'll be interesting to see. What happens here in the next few weeks with Penn State. Are they able to build off of that and really, because they clearly have talent. The issue was they just weren't, pulling it together. Maybe they have now, right? So we'll start to see that. And Auburn, on the other hand, with I don't know what their schedule is over the next couple of weeks, but it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. And another team that's similar to Penn State in that regard is Oregon, who everyone will remember got crushed by Georgia in week 1. And they were playing against BYU, who was ranked 12th, while they were ranked 25th. And Oregon ended up winning 41-20. So showing some of that, Oregon offense that we'd expect to see from them, great speed from a lot of their players and things like that. So it seems like, it's kind of a question of, was Oregon actually bad, or is Georgia just that good?
Well, yeah, and I think it's a little bit of both. That Georgia is absolutely that good, but also that maybe BYU isn't as good as people thought, right? So early in the season, you just don't know. You gotta let this thing filter through a little bit, and I think in the next week or two, basically once conference or non-conference games are over, and we start getting into conference seasons, by then, by about the second conference game, you pretty much know what's going on, and then teams will continue to improve from there, and some will, and others won't. But it'll start to become a little more clear.
That's right. And this one was interesting to us coming from Michigan. Michigan State was playing against Washington from Pac-12 and ended up losing, even though they ranked number 11th, 39-28. Pretty ugly game for Michigan State from what I saw in the replay. A lot of, turnovers and missed tackles and things of that nature. So.
Well, and I don't know if I mentioned it in the podcast, but I know I mentioned it in our conversations about the fact that there was this odd stat that Michigan State had not won a non-conference game against the Pac-12, where they were the away game. Okay, so I didn't state that properly. It had been since 1959. 12 games that Michigan State had lost every one of the times that they traveled out to the Pac-12 for a pre-conference game. Obviously they've played the Pac-12 many times in bowl games and won, right? But when they actually traveled to the home field of a Pac-12 team, they have not won on that since 1959.
Yeah, well, kept the streak alive, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a struggle for them. And then this one was pretty crazy. Appalachian State versus Troy, which was the center for College Game Day after Appalachian State's crazy upset against Texas A&M. And people recall that their first game was that crazy game where they lost like 64-62, after they put up
North Carolina.
Right, after they put up 40 points in the fourth quarter, right? So App State's had a crazy start to their year already. And that continued with this Troy game where they were down, I believe it was 28-26, with literally 2 seconds to go. It was like they're at about midfield, so it was like a Hail Mary type situation. And the quarterback goes for it, and the Troy guy bats the ball down like you're supposed to, but there's a App State guy there who catches the ball as it's coming down, runs to the outside, scores a touchdown. Game over. They win 32-28. Fans storm the field. It's crazy.
There's been some parties in Appalachian State campus for sure.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you've seen, there's a clip.
I did.
Well,
yes.
I was going to say, did you see the clip with the Appalachian State radio announcers?
Oh, no, I haven't seen that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. I have to show that to you because their mics just start peaking like crazy and they're just absolutely losing it. Yeah. That's great.
It is.
So,
now, see, that's college football. That's what I want more of, dang it.
Yeah.
I want the passion to return and the just genuine excitement for the young athletes that are out there competing as amateurs. Okay?
Yep. Well, and one interesting thing that I noticed, because I watched the highlights for that game as well, Troy actually purposefully, on their last series, their quarterback ran away basically from a guy who was following him and purposefully got a safety in the corner of the end zone, and ran out of bounds, right? Basically, he used up a bunch of time, purposefully got the safety, right? So they wouldn't have to do a kickoff, or rather a punt, right? They got to just do a standard kickoff. And then on the kickoff, they didn't do a standard kickoff. They did a kind of a muffed kickoff, right? Where it bounced and went to the 30 or whatever.
Gotcha.
So, a bit of an odd decision that kind of came to bite them in the butt.
Right. Wow. I didn't even see the highlights of that one. I may have to go back and look at that.
Yeah. And then one last one here to mention, an interesting upset. Kansas played against Houston in the Big 12 and ended up winning 48-30. Now they have a new coach, newer coach. So seems like he's doing some stuff at Kansas, probably making your Uncle Mike, my Uncle Mike, your brother Mike, a little bit happier about that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mike is, and he's hearing lots of good things, right? He's amazed at what the transformation of that team in terms of its physical and, physical attributes. So their strength and conditioning coordinator, they're more mentally tough than they've been in years. So he's transformed them from a psychology standpoint. I mean, there's lots of good things going on in Lawrence right now.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see in these next few weeks. I mean, Mike acknowledges they still don't have a lot of talent, and so they're going to lose some football games because of lack of talent. But if he keeps going in the right direction, then that kind of success will lead to a few more open doors in recruiting and good things for the future.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And so then for the upcoming week 4 of college football, we don't have any Nebraska to look forward to or dread, depending on your point of view. But we are getting into conference games, which has led to some interesting matchups. One interesting one being Clemson versus Wake Forest, which is being played at Wake Forest. I think I saw a headline from your favorite football analyst, Paul Feinbaum, saying
Oh
that
God.
saying that this was like a must-win for Clemson to preserve their playoff hopes.
Well, I would say that's true. You know, but I would also say that there's a pretty darn good probability that Clemson's going to win it. But you know, that's Feinbaum just loved to say stuff that drives clicks. I don't I don't view him as a very credible, you know, college football expert.
Right.
I view him as a guy who's just a blowhard.
That's why I said he's your favorite.
Oh yeah,
Definitely. Um,
absolutely.
well, it'll be an interesting one to watch. I thought this one would be interesting, maybe not so much nationally, but from the Nebraska fan point of view. Iowa State versus Baylor, which is being played at Iowa State. Both of whose coaches, Matt Campbell and Dave Aranda, are high on many people's lists for replacements for Scott Frost. So I'm kind of curious to see how that goes.
Me too. And I know that some people would say that you're crazy if you think Dave Aranda is going to leave Baylor to go to Nebraska right now, given recent history and contracts and all that. But at the end of the day, Nebraska fans can dream. So you're right. That's absolutely a game that I'll have my eye on this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Another good one is Tennessee versus Florida, which is being played at Tennessee. Tennessee is ranked 11th and Florida is ranked 20th. So it feels like it's been a while since Tennessee has had like a really good season. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep this momentum going.
Right, I would agree, and this will be a good test for them because I mean Florida, kind of got kicked to the curb, but they don't lack talent, so it'll that could be an interesting game. And did you say that one's at Florida?
No, it's at Tennessee.
Oh, that helped Tennessee a ton.
And
That's a big deal.
One interesting thing from last weekend is that Florida played against Southern Florida, and they won, but it was only 31-28. So quite a battle, it would seem.
Right. I know. So I presume that Tennessee is the favorite in this scenario, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, they definitely are. Then there's number 10 Arkansas versus number 23 Texas A&M. Texas A&M, who's playing at home after beating Miami last week. So trying to recover from the tough loss to Appalachian State.
Yes, exactly. Well, and Arkansas is having a great season.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge game for SEC. I guess you'd call it SEC West implications because in terms of just positioning, right? Because Auburn's not so great. And and Arkansas is just pummeling people, right? They're running the football down people's throats. So I'm interested in that game just because they're doing a kind of football that I enjoy.
Right. Now, Dad always loves that.
Absolutely.
And then the Pac-12, we have Washington coming off the win over Michigan State playing against Stanford, and it's at Washington.
Was it Washington against who?
Washington against Stanford.
Stanford. Okay, that's the part I didn't get.
Yeah, and it's at home for Washington, so they're definitely the favorites. But Stanford's one of those teams you can never quite count out.
No, that's true, but I feel like that I would lean pretty heavily to Washington in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And then in the Big Ten, and this is the one that we'll be predicting for next week, we have Ohio State versus Wisconsin. It is at Ohio State. And obviously Wisconsin has already had an upset loss on their resume this year. So, it's hard to say if they're going to be, the same dominant force in our division of the Big Ten that they have been historically. But do you think they can put up a fight in Columbus against this Ohio State team who did show some vulnerabilities against Notre Dame?
Well, but I feel like they're starting to find themselves, they being Ohio State. No, is the quick answer. I think that, like you say, can Wisconsin keep it close and kind of hang in there, absolutely they can. But I don't think they have the horses to stay with Ohio State. Not this year.
Yeah, I think Ohio State kind of played a nobody last week, but they did like crush them badly. So yeah, I think their quarterback is starting to find his groove again.
I agree,
which is a bad sign for Wisconsin.
Yep, I would agree. So yeah, I'm definitely leaning to an Ohio State victory. It's just a matter of magnitude. The fact that it's in Columbus certainly, lends more credibility to Ohio State winning and maybe comfortably.
Right. Yep.
Because Ohio State's going to be motivated to make a statement, right?
Yes. Right. They haven't had a statement win yet, so this is a good time to do it.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and predict that Ohio State wins, but that Wisconsin, is able to keep it close, maybe for 3/4 of the game, and then maybe Ohio State kind of pulls away near the end. So I will say Ohio State wins 41 to 24.
Okay. Well, you know what? Boy, how do I work my way around that score? That's a good score. I'm going to say it's going to be lower scoring though. So I'm going to say it's going to be 35-17.
Okay.
Ohio State victory.
Yep, both teams with good defenses for sure.
Right. And so the defenses will score, and so the offenses are going to, score 2 or 3 touchdowns each. Well, Ohio State will score 4 and you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah, I get the idea.
Well, what's exciting is that, in fact, I was just talking with your mother about this. Was, ironically, at least as we do this podcast, I am not scheduled to work to drive on Saturday, so I'm going to have a free day to watch college football, and it's a week, of course, that Nebraska's not even playing, so I don't even get to sit down and enjoy the Cornhuskers. But given that we're 1-3, that's probably been a blessing. So, I'll be able to sit down and watch that Iowa State game, which will be very interesting for me and some others. So, going to be a great weekend of college football.
Yeah, I will say because we've had some, private discussions when we were together in Traverse City about the various options that are out there for our new college football coach, and Aranda's your number one. I think I agree he'd be great, but then we're talking about kind of like second and third, and I think that Matt Campbell from Iowa State is a pretty good pick. You're a little less confident in him, but if he pulls out the upset against Dave Aranda this weekend, what would you say to that?
Well, I think that would speak to his ability to be as a coach, which I've never questioned. I've always thought that he has been a good coach ever since he's been at Iowa State. I think he's demonstrated that pretty consistently. The thing about him that makes me less high on him as a choice for Nebraska's next coach is that he has not demonstrated the ability to recruit to Iowa State at an enhanced level. And I believe that Dave Aranda has. Okay, he's recruiting to a small Christian school like Baylor, and he's found a way to get some really talented players that end up playing in the NFL, and has competed with the Oklahomas and Texases of the world. So that's why I'm feeling the way I am. It's about not about the coaching, but all the other aspects of being a head football coach.
Right. No, yeah, there's definitely something to that. Obviously, he would have way more resources, and Nebraska has better history and all that stuff than Iowa State does, which I think would help Matt Campbell in recruiting. But he may not have that X factor that Aranda has.
Exactly. Well, and I was so admired Dave Aranda as a defensive coordinator, and then he got his opportunity to be a head coach and has done something with it. But I would concede that Dave Aranda has not built a program, right? Matt Campbell has. So right. There's a thing in Matt's corner.
That's true. So. That's true. All right. Well, We'll be watching a lot of these games this weekend. We'll see how Ohio State, Wisconsin goes, and we'll be back next week to preview more in depth the Indiana game for Nebraska that will be so crucial to the remainder of our season, as well as any other updates and upsets that inevitably will come our way in this week of college football.
That sounds like a good time.
All right. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can reach out to us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us on Spotify if you search for College Football Throwdown, or on Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love listening to the fans and getting feedback. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.